Picture this, a young woman scrubbing floors in one of Chicago's most prestigious hotels, working tirelessly to support her ailing grandmother. She's invisible to most, just another face in the crowd. But what if I told you that this seemingly ordinary housekeeper would uncover a web of corruption, face betrayal, and rise to become a leader who changed everything? This is a story about courage, integrity, and the power of believing in yourself, even when no one else does. Let's begin. Emily Carter, a young woman in her late 20s, moves briskly down one of the hotel's plush hallways. She wears a crisp uniform, her name tag reading, Emily, pinned neatly over her heart. Her dark hair is tied back into a practical bun, and she carries a cleaning caddy filled with supplies. Despite the early hour, Emily looks focused, her eyes scanning each room number as she works. She pauses outside room 412, unlocks it, and steps inside. As she begins tidying up, a task she performs with precision and care, the narrator's voice comes in softly, setting the stage for our story. For Emily Carter, life has never been easy. Raised by her grandmother after losing both parents at a young age, she learned early on what it meant to work hard and take care of those you love. Now, every paycheck goes toward supporting her ailing grandmother, who depends on her entirely. But despite the weight of responsibility resting on her shoulders, Emily carries herself with quiet dignity. She greets everyone with a smile, even when the days are long and the nights are lonely. Back in the bustling employee break room, we see Emily pouring herself a cup of coffee during a brief pause in her shift. The room is lively, filled with chatter from other staff members. Some laugh about last night's big game, others complain about demanding guests. Suddenly, the door swings open, and all conversation halts. An elderly man shuffles in, his appearance starkly contrasting with the polished professionalism of the hotel. His clothes are worn but clean, his shoes scuffed from years of use. He leans heavily on a cane, his movements slow and deliberate. The name tag clipped to his jacket reads, George Patterson. Whispers ripple through the room. "Is that the new janitor?" someone mutters under their breath. "He looks like he could barely lift a mop," another adds sarcastically. George doesn't seem fazed by the whispers or the stares. Instead, he makes his way to the corner table, where he sits quietly, clutching a brown paper bag containing his lunch. Emily watches him from across the room, her brow furrowing slightly. Unlike the others, she feels a pang of sympathy rather than judgment. Quietly, she grabs a second styrofoam cup, fills it with coffee, and walks over to George's table. "Hi there," she says warmly, placing the cup in front of him. "Thought you might need this." George looks up, surprised. His weathered face softens, and he gives her a small, grateful smile. "Thank you, miss," he replies, his voice gravelly but kind. "That's very thoughtful." "No problem," Emily says with a shrug. "First day can be tough. If you need anything, just let me know." As they exchange a few more words, the camera pans out slightly, showing how the rest of the staff continues to glance suspiciously at George. They don't understand why Emily would bother being nice to someone so seemingly insignificant. But something about George catches the audience's attention too. While he may appear frail, there's a sharpness in his gaze as he observes the people around him. He listens intently to snippets of conversation, noting details most would overlook. There's a sense that he's not quite who he seems, but for now, his true identity remains a mystery. The scene ends with Emily returning to her duties, leaving George alone once again. He takes a sip of his coffee, still watching the staff closely. A faint smile plays on his lips, hinting at secrets yet to unravel. Brian stops abruptly as he passes Emily, his gaze lingering on her longer than necessary. "Carter," he barks, his tone clipped. "You missed a spot over there." He points vaguely toward a corner where the floor gleams perfectly clean. Emily forces a polite smile, though her jaw tightens slightly. "Yes, Mr. Thompson." I'll get right on it. As Brian walks away, his polished shoes clicking against the marble, the narrator's voice comes in, low and ominous. To the outside world, Brian Thompson is the epitome of professionalism, a man who runs one of Chicago's finest hotels with precision and efficiency. But those who work beneath him know the truth. Beneath his polished exterior lies a ruthless manipulator, willing to exploit anyone to maintain his grip on power. The scene shifts to Brian sitting in his office, a dimly lit room decorated with expensive art pieces and shelves lined with awards. A knock at the door interrupts his solitude. It's a shady-looking man wearing a leather jacket, clearly out of place in the elegant surroundings. "Package for you, boss," the man says gruffly, sliding a brown envelope across the desk. Brian opens it casually, revealing stacks of cash inside. He counts it quickly before nodding in satisfaction. "Good. Make sure the next shipment arrives on schedule," Brian instructs, his voice dripping with authority. "And keep your mouth shut about what goes on here." The man nods and leaves without another word. As the door closes behind him, Brian leans back in his chair, lighting a cigar. On his computer screen, spreadsheets detail suspicious transactions, money laundering operations disguised as legitimate hotel expenses. Cut to later that evening, deep within the hotel's restricted wing. A group of well-dressed men and women gather around a poker table in a hidden suite. Cigarette smoke fills the air, and glasses clink as chips are pushed across the green felt surface. Brian sits at the head of the table, overseeing the high-stakes gambling operation with a smug grin. Meanwhile, Emily struggles to make ends meet. She's working overtime tonight, cleaning rooms long after most staff have gone home. Her mind drifts to her grandmother, lying frail in a hospital bed, dependent on expensive treatments. Every extra hour she works brings her closer to paying off mounting medical bills. But her efforts don't go unnoticed, or unchallenged. Jess Harper, a fellow housekeeper known for her jealousy and gossip, watches Emily from down the hallway. Jess has always resented Emily's quiet competence and the fact that Alvin Richards, the assistant manager, seems to treat her kindly. In the break room, Jess corners two other co-workers, whispering conspiratorially. "Have you seen how Alvin looks at her?" Jess sneers, her lips curling into a smirk. "It's disgusting. She thinks she's better than everyone else because she bats her eyelashes at him." Her words spread like wildfire among the staff, planting seeds of doubt and resentment. Soon, rumors begin circulating that Emily is having an affair with Alvin, a claim that couldn't be further from the truth. Alvin himself is a kind-hearted man in his mid-30s, frustrated by Brian's corrupt practices but too afraid to speak up. When he hears the whispers about Emily, he approaches her during a rare quiet moment. "Emily, I need to talk to you," Alvin says quietly, pulling her aside. "There are things being said about us. Rumors started by Jess, I suspect." Emily sighs, rubbing her temples. "I figured as much. Don't worry, Alvin, I'm used to people talking behind my back. Just focus on doing your job, and I'll do mine." Despite her calm demeanor, the stress is evident in her tired eyes. Unbeknownst to them, George Patterson has been observing everything. From his perch in the corner of the break room, sipping coffee or sweeping floors, he listens intently to conversations, watches interactions, and takes mental notes. He notices how Brian intimidates employees, how Jess spreads venomous lies, and how Emily carries the weight of the world on her shoulders, all while maintaining her dignity. One night, as George cleans the hallway outside the restricted wing, he overhears muffled laughter and the clinking of glasses coming from behind a locked door. Curiosity flickers in his eyes, but he doesn't investigate further. Instead, he continues sweeping, filing away yet another piece of the puzzle. George Patterson may appear harmless, the narrator muses, but his presence in the hotel is no accident. What he knows, and what he chooses to do with that knowledge, could change everything. Asterisk. The act ends with Emily returning home late at night, exhausted but determined. She flips through her grandmother's medical bills, calculating how much more she needs to save. Meanwhile, George sits alone in his tiny apartment, studying old photographs and newspaper clippings spread across his kitchen table. His expression hardens with resolve. Through George's eyes, we see snippets of life at the hotel, the exhausted housekeepers rushing between rooms, the arrogant chefs barking orders in the kitchen, and the ever-present shadow of Brian Thompson looming over everyone like a storm cloud. One morning, George witnesses an incident that leaves even him momentarily speechless. In the staff break room, Brian berates a young bellhop named Marcus for being late to his shift. "You think this place runs itself?" Brian snaps, his voice cutting through the room like a whip. "Maybe you'd rather go back to flipping burgers at some greasy diner." Marcus stammers an apology, his face burning with shame as the other employees look away, unwilling, or too afraid, to intervene. George watches silently from the corner, his jaw tightening slightly. Though he doesn't say a word, there's a flicker of anger in his eyes. Later that day, George finds himself working alongside Emily in one of the guest suites. She's tidying up after a particularly messy VIP guest, muttering under her breath about how entitled some people can be. "Rough day?" George asks gently, leaning on his mop handle. Emily looks up and gives him a weary smile. "You could say that. Some days, it feels like no matter how hard I work, it's never enough." George nods thoughtfully, his gaze steady. Hard work isn't always appreciated, not by others, anyway. But what matters is whether you know you've done your best. Integrity doesn't need applause to exist. Emily pauses, struck by the simplicity yet depth of his words. For a moment, she studies him curiously. There's something about George, his calm demeanor, his quiet wisdom, that feels different from anyone else she's met here. "Thanks, George," she says finally. "I needed to hear that today." As the days pass, George continues to share small lessons with Emily during their brief interactions. He tells her stories about his own experiences, how he once worked multiple jobs to support his family, how kindness and perseverance helped him overcome challenges. Each conversation strengthens their bond, though Emily remains unaware of the larger purpose behind George's presence. Meanwhile, Alvin Richards grows increasingly suspicious of George. Unlike the other staff members who dismiss him as just another elderly janitor, Alvin notices the way George seems to observe everything so intently. One evening, as George sweeps the hallway outside Brian's office, Alvin approaches him cautiously. "Evening, George," Alvin says, trying to sound casual. "How's it going?" George stops mid-sweep and looks up, his expression unreadable. "Evening, Mr. Richards. Just doing my job." Alvin hesitates before continuing. "You've been here a few weeks now, right? Seems like you've settled in well." George chuckles softly. "Settled in? Not sure I'll ever get used to these marble floors. They're slippery when wet." Alvin forces a laugh but presses further. "Still, you seem observant. More than most folks around here." George tilts his head, meeting Alvin's gaze directly. "Observant? Maybe. Or maybe I'm just old enough to notice things younger folks might miss." His tone is light, but there's an edge to it, a subtle warning that makes Alvin uneasy. Determined to uncover the truth, Alvin begins quietly investigating George's background. He checks personnel files, searches online databases, and even asks discreet questions among the staff. But every lead ends in a dead end. It's as if George Patterson appeared out of thin air. Back in the hotel, Emily faces new challenges. The rumors spread by Jess Harper continue to circulate, causing tension among the staff. One afternoon, Emily overhears two co-workers whispering about her supposed affair with Alvin. Hurt and frustrated, she confronts Jess in the break room. "Why are you doing this? Emily demands, her voice trembling with emotion. What did I ever do to you? Jess sneers, crossing her arms. Oh, please. Don't act all innocent. You think sucking up to Alvin will get you ahead? Newsflash, it won't. I'm not trying to get ahead, Emily retorts. I'm just trying to survive, same as everyone else. But apparently, that's too much to ask without someone tearing me down. Their argument escalates until Brian storms into the room, demanding silence. This is a professional workplace, he barks, glaring at both women. If I catch either of you causing trouble again, you'll regret it. His threat hangs heavy in the air as Emily storms out, tears threatening to spill. Outside, she leans against the wall, breathing deeply to compose herself. That's when George appears beside her, offering a tissue. People hurt others because they're hurting themselves, he says softly. Don't let them steal your peace. Emily takes the tissue, nodding slowly. It's just, sometimes, it feels like the harder I try, the more obstacles pile up. And yet you keep trying, George replies. That's what makes you strong, Emily. Don't forget that. As the scene transitions, the narrator reflects on George's growing influence. Though Emily doesn't realize it yet, George is planting seeds of resilience within her. He knows that the battles she faces now will prepare her for the larger fight ahead, a fight against the corruption that threatens to destroy everything she holds dear. The act ends with George returning to his apartment once again. This time, he sits at his cluttered kitchen table, examining a photograph of a younger version of himself standing proudly in front of the very same hotel decades earlier. His expression is somber but resolute. Whatever secrets George carries, one thing is clear, his presence in Rivermount Hotel is no coincidence. As she nears the restricted wing of the hotel, she hears faint voices drifting from behind a partially closed door. Curious, she slows her pace and listens carefully. It's Brian Thompson's voice, low and urgent, and another man whose tone is equally tense. I told you not to leave any paper trail, Brian hisses. If anyone finds out about the transfers, we're finished. The second man responds, his voice tinged with frustration. Relax, Brian. Everything's covered. The money's already been funneled through 3 different accounts. No one will trace it back here. Emily freezes, her heart pounding in her chest. Her hands grip the handle of her cleaning cart tightly as she processes what she's hearing. Stolen money. Illegal transfers. Corruption at the highest level of the hotel. She instinctively takes a step back, trying to retreat before they notice her presence. But just as she moves, the wheels of her cart squeak loudly against the floor. The voices inside fall silent. Who's there? Brian demands sharply, his voice cutting through the stillness. Panic surges through Emily as she quickly ducks into an alcove, pressing herself against the wall. A moment later, the door swings open, and Brian steps out, scanning the hallway suspiciously. His eyes narrow when he spots the cleaning cart abandoned in the middle of the corridor. What the hell is this doing here? He mutters, kicking it aside in irritation. He glances around once more before retreating back into the room, slamming the door shut behind him. Emily waits several agonizing seconds before daring to move. Her mind races with questions and fears. What should she do? If she reports what she heard, would anyone believe her? Or would Brian retaliate, possibly costing her the job she desperately needs, or worse? The weight of her discovery presses heavily on her shoulders as she hurries away, her usual calm demeanor shattered. Later that evening, Emily finds herself sitting alone in the employee break room during a rare lull in her shift. Her hands tremble slightly as she sips her coffee, unable to shake the feeling that she's being watched. That's when George enters, his presence bringing an unexpected sense of calm. You look like you've got the weight of the world on your shoulders, George says gently, taking a seat across from her. Emily hesitates, unsure if she should confide in him. But something about his kind eyes and steady demeanor makes her trust him. I overheard something tonight, she begins quietly, glancing around to ensure no one else is listening. Something bad. About Brian. Money laundering, maybe even theft. George doesn't react immediately. Instead, he leans forward slightly, his expression serious but reassuring. That's a heavy burden to carry, he says after a moment. What do you plan to do about it? I don't know, Emily admits, her voice barely above a whisper. If I report it, I could lose my job, or worse. But if I stay silent, I'm letting them get away with it. Either way, I feel trapped. George nods thoughtfully, his gaze steady. Sometimes, doing the right thing means taking risks. But it also means being smart about how you handle those risks. Trust your instincts, Emily, but be careful. Very careful. His words linger in the air, offering both encouragement and caution. Emily feels a flicker of resolve ignite within her, though fear still lingers. The next day, Emily notices subtle changes in the atmosphere at the hotel. Brian seems more agitated than usual, snapping at employees and pacing restlessly through the hallways. Jess Harper shoots Emily suspicious glances, as if sensing that something is off. Even Alvin Richards appears uneasy, avoiding eye contact whenever their paths cross. Meanwhile, George continues to observe everything with quiet precision. He watches as Brian meets secretly with various individuals in secluded corners of the hotel, exchanging documents or briefcases filled with cash. Each interaction adds another piece to the puzzle forming in George's mind. Late one night, while cleaning near the restricted wing, George overhears fragments of another conversation between Brian and his accomplices. They mention names, dates, and account numbers, all critical details that could expose their operation. George memorizes every word, his years of experience allowing him to retain information effortlessly. Back in his apartment, George sits at his cluttered kitchen table, jotting down notes in a worn notebook. Beside him lies a stack of old newspaper clippings detailing scandals involving corrupt businessmen and criminal enterprises. One clipping catches the light, a headline about a former hotel executive who disappeared under mysterious circumstances decades ago. George stares at the clipping for a long moment before closing the notebook decisively. Some secrets are meant to stay buried, the narrator muses. Asterisk, but others demand to be uncovered, no matter the cost. Asterisk. The act ends with Emily lying awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. Her mind replays the conversation she overheard, along with George's advice. For the first time, she allows herself to imagine a future where justice prevails, not just for herself, but for all the employees who suffer under Brian's tyranny. But as the camera pans out, showing the sprawling skyline of Chicago beyond her window, a sense of foreboding settles in. The road ahead will not be easy. As she opens her locker, something catches her eye, a small envelope tucked into the corner. Puzzled, she pulls it out and examines it. Her heart sinks when she sees bundles of cash inside. Before she can process what's happening, Jess Harper bursts into the room, pretending to look shocked. "Oh my God!" Jess exclaims loudly, drawing the attention of nearby co-workers. "Is that money? In your locker?" Emily stares at the envelope in disbelief, shaking her head. "I don't know how this got here. I didn't put it there." But Jess isn't listening. Instead, she starts shouting, "Someone call security. We've got a thief on staff." Within moments, the break room fills with curious employees, whispering and pointing fingers. Brian Thompson strides in shortly after, his expression stern and calculating. "What's going on here?" he demands, though his tone suggests he already knows exactly what's happening. Jess steps forward dramatically, holding up the envelope for everyone to see. "I found this in Emily's locker. It looks like stolen cash from one of the guest rooms." Brian turns to Emily, his cold eyes boring into hers. Emily, is this true? Did you steal from our guests? No. Emily protests, her voice trembling with panic. I swear, I didn't do this. Someone must have planted it there. But Brian cuts her off, raising his voice so the entire room can hear him. Stealing is a serious offense, Emily. Not only are you fired, but we'll also need to inform the authorities. The room erupts into murmurs as Emily stands frozen, overwhelmed by shock and betrayal. Some employees shake their heads in disappointment, others exchange knowing glances, clearly believing the worst of her. Alvin Richards watches silently from the doorway, his brow furrowed with concern. He doesn't say anything, not yet, but there's a flicker of doubt in his eyes as he observes the spectacle unfolding before him. Throughout the ordeal, George Patterson remains in the background, leaning against the wall with a broom in hand. His expression is unreadable, but his sharp gaze misses nothing. He watches as Jess smirks triumphantly, as Brian delivers his verdict with cruel finality, and as Emily's face crumples under the weight of public humiliation. Later, as the chaos dies down and the staff disperses, George approaches Emily cautiously. She's sitting alone on a bench outside the hotel, tears streaming down her cheeks. They think I'm a thief, she whispers brokenly, clutching her hands tightly together. How could they believe I'd do something like that? George sits beside her, his presence offering quiet comfort. People believe what they want to believe, especially when it's easier than facing the truth. But remember, Emily, you're not alone in this. She looks at him, her eyes red-rimmed but searching for answers. What am I supposed to do now? I can't prove I didn't take that money. George hesitates, choosing his words carefully. Sometimes, the best defense is patience. Let them reveal themselves. Trust me, the truth has a way of coming out when you least expect it. Though his response offers little immediate relief, Emily nods faintly, drawing strength from his calm assurance. Meanwhile, Brian celebrates his victory in private. Back in his office, he pours himself a glass of whiskey and raises it in a mock toast. That takes care of her, he mutters to himself, a satisfied smirk spreading across his face. One less loose end to worry about. But unknown to him, George is already planning his next move. That evening, while cleaning the restricted wing, George deliberately lingers near Brian's office. When the coast is clear, he slips inside and begins searching through drawers and files. He finds what he's looking for, a ledger detailing the hotel's illicit financial transactions, complete with names, dates, and amounts. Carefully, he photographs each page with his phone before returning everything to its original place. Back in his apartment later that night, George reviews the photos, his expression grim but determined. On his cluttered kitchen table lies the same stack of newspaper clippings from earlier, along with new notes scrawled in his precise handwriting. Every crime leaves behind evidence, the narrator reflects. Asterisk, and George Patterson knows exactly where to find it. Asterisk. The act ends with Emily walking home under the dim glow of streetlights, her shoulders slumped with defeat. For the first time since starting at Rivermount Hotel, she feels utterly powerless. But as the camera pans upward to show George watching her from a distance, a sense of hope begins to stir. Whatever George is planning, it's clear that he won't let Brian's scheme go unpunished. This is a black mark on this hotel's reputation, Brian declares loudly, ensuring everyone within earshot can hear him. And I won't tolerate dishonesty among my employees. Emily Carter, you're officially terminated. A murmur ripples through the crowd. Some look sympathetic but say nothing, others nod in agreement, quick to judge without evidence. Emily feels the weight of their stares pressing down on her, each one another nail in what feels like an emotional coffin. Just as Brian turns to hand the envelope over to security, George Patterson steps forward from the edge of the crowd. His sudden appearance draws startled glances, he's usually invisible, blending into the background like furniture. But today, he stands tall, his weathered face set in an expression of quiet resolve. "Hold on just a minute, Mr. Thompson," George says firmly, his gravelly voice cutting through the tension. Brian frowns, clearly annoyed by the interruption. "What is it, George? This doesn't concern you." "Oh, but it does," George replies calmly, taking a step closer. "Because framing an innocent person concerns everyone here, including me." The room falls silent, all eyes now on George. Brian's jaw tightens, his irritation giving way to suspicion. "What are you talking about?" Brian snaps. George reaches into his pocket and pulls out a small device, a USB drive. He holds it up for everyone to see. "This contains footage from a hidden camera I installed in the break room," George explains, his tone steady and measured. "It shows exactly how that envelope ended up in Emily's locker. Care to guess who put it there?" Brian's face pales slightly, though he quickly masks his reaction with a dismissive laugh. "You expect anyone to believe this nonsense? You're just a janitor trying to stir up trouble." But before Brian can deflect further, Alvin Richards steps forward, his expression serious. "Let's see the footage," Alvin insists, crossing his arms. If George says he has proof, we owe it to Emily, and to ourselves, to hear him out. Reluctantly, Brian motions for someone to set up a laptop at the front desk. As the video begins playing, the truth unfolds in stark detail. The grainy footage shows Jess sneaking into the break room late at night, carefully placing the envelope of cash into Emily's locker. It's undeniable evidence of their conspiracy. Gasps ripple through the crowd as the reality sinks in. Emily stares at the screen, tears welling in her eyes, not of sadness this time, but of relief. "I knew it," she whispers, her voice trembling with emotion. Jess stammers, backing away nervously as accusing glares turn toward her. I was just following orders. Brian told me to do it." All eyes swing to Brian, whose composure finally cracks. Fury flashes across his face as he points an accusatory finger at George. "You think you're clever, old man?" Brian growls, his voice low and menacing. "Who do you think you are to interfere?" George meets his gaze steadily, unflinching. "Someone who knows exactly who you are, Brian. And trust me, your days of running this place like your personal kingdom are over." For a moment, Brian looks genuinely rattled, though he quickly tries to regain control. "This is ridiculous. Security, escort this lunatic out of here." But no one moves. The staff exchanges uneasy glances, unsure whom to side with anymore. Even Brian's usual loyalists seem hesitant, their confidence shaken by the revelation. Alvin steps forward again, his tone authoritative. "Brian, until we sort this out, you're suspended pending investigation. Effective immediately." Brian sputters in disbelief. "You can't do that. Do you know who I am?" "Yes," Alvin replies coolly. "And right now, you're a liability to this hotel." As two security guards approach to escort Brian away, his fury boils over. He lunges toward George, shouting, "You'll regret this. All of you will." But the guards restrain him, dragging him out of the lobby while he continues to rant and curse. The remaining staff watches in stunned silence as the man who once ruled them with fear is led away like a common criminal. With Brian gone, the atmosphere shifts dramatically. Slowly, murmurs of support begin to rise for Emily. "Emily, we're so sorry," one coworker says sincerely. "We should have known better than to believe those lies." Another nods in agreement. "You've always been one of the hardest workers here. We let you down." Emily manages a shaky smile, overwhelmed by the sudden reversal of fortune. She turns to George, her gratitude shining brightly in her eyes. "How did you know?" she asks softly. "How did you get that footage?" George shrugs modestly, though there's a hint of pride in his smile. Sometimes, all it takes is paying attention. And knowing when to act. Alvin approaches them next, offering Emily a warm handshake. "We'll make sure your name is cleared, Emily," he promises. "And if there's anything else you need, anything at all, you let me know." Though still processing everything, Emily feels a renewed sense of hope. For the first time in days, the weight on her shoulders begins to lift. Later that evening, George sits alone in his apartment, reviewing the footage once more. Beside him lies a photograph of himself standing proudly in front of Rivermount Hotel decades earlier, back when he was its owner. Some battles are fought silently, the narrator reflects. But their victories resonate far beyond the moment. The act ends with George gazing out his window at the illuminated hotel across the street. His expression is peaceful yet resolute, knowing that justice has finally begun to prevail. George clears his throat, drawing everyone's attention. His demeanor is calm but commanding, radiating an authority that seems almost out of place for someone who has spent weeks posing as a janitor. "Before we proceed," George begins, his voice steady and deliberate, "there's something I need to share with all of you. Something that may come as unexpected." He pauses, allowing the weight of his words to settle over the room. Then, slowly, he removes his worn cap and sets it aside. He straightens his posture, his weathered face now illuminated by the soft glow of the chandelier above. "My name isn't just George Patterson," he continues, his tone unwavering. "I am George Alistair Patterson III, the original founder and owner of Rivermount Hotel." A collective gasp fills the room as the staff exchanges bewildered glances. Emily's eyes widen in shock, her hands flying to her mouth. Alvin leans back in his chair, his expression a mix of awe and disbelief. "I sold this hotel decades ago," George explains, his gaze sweeping across the room. "But when I heard rumors of corruption under its new management, I decided to investigate firsthand. That's why I returned, disguised as a janitor, to uncover the truth." His revelation sends ripples of astonishment through the group. For weeks, they had dismissed him as nothing more than a harmless elderly man pushing a cleaning cart. Now, they realize he was observing every move, gathering evidence, and waiting for the right moment to act. Meanwhile, down in the security office, Brian Thompson paces furiously, still seething over his suspension. Jess Harper sits nearby, visibly shaken, her earlier bravado replaced by fear. "They can't keep me locked up here forever," Brian mutters darkly. "This isn't over." Just then, the door swings open, and two armed security guards step inside, flanked by police officers. Behind them stands George, his presence imposing despite his age. "Brian Thompson," George announces, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "You're fired. Effective immediately." Brian whirls around, his face contorted with rage. You think you can waltz in here and—" "I don't think," George interrupts sharply. "I know. And so will the authorities once they review the evidence I've collected against you." One of the police officers steps forward, holding up a warrant. "Mr. Thompson, you're under arrest for fraud, embezzlement, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit criminal acts. Please come with us." Brian sputters incoherently, his confidence crumbling as handcuffs are placed on his wrists. Jess tries to slip away unnoticed, but another officer blocks her path. "And you too, Ms. Harper," the officer says sternly. "You're implicated in this scheme as well." As both Brian and Jess are led out, their protests echo through the hallway, growing fainter with each step. The corrupt senior managers who aided them are rounded up shortly after, their shocked expressions saying it all. Back in the boardroom, the remaining staff listens intently as George outlines his plan to restore integrity to Rivermount Hotel. "This establishment was built on principles of excellence and fairness," he declares, his voice filled with conviction. "It's time we return to those values. Starting today, anyone involved in illegal activities will be held accountable." Those who remain will help rebuild this hotel into what it was always meant to be, a symbol of trust and hospitality. Emily raises her hand hesitantly, her voice trembling with emotion. What happens to me? Am I still? You're staying, Emily, George assures her warmly. In fact, I'd like to offer you a promotion. Your dedication and resilience have earned my respect. How would you feel about becoming the new assistant manager? Tears well up in Emily's eyes as she nods fervently. Thank you, Mr. Patterson. I won't let you down. Alvin smiles approvingly, adding, with Emily by your side, sir, I'm confident we can turn things around. George nods, his expression softening. Good. Because together, we'll ensure that Rivermount Hotel rises again, not just as a business, but as a beacon of hope for everyone who works here. The act ends with George standing outside the hotel later that evening, gazing up at its towering facade. The lights shine brighter than ever, casting a warm glow over the city streets below. Sometimes, the narrator reflects, the greatest victories come not from power or wealth, but from courage and compassion. George Patterson proved that even the humblest disguise can reveal the strongest heart. As George turns to leave, his silhouette blends into the night, leaving behind a legacy of justice and renewal. In the grand lobby, reporters and news crews gather, eager to document the fallout from Brian Thompson's arrest. Headlines blare across television screens, corruption uncovered at Chicago's iconic Rivermount Hotel, and billionaire founder returns to restore justice. George stands near the front desk, fielding questions from journalists while maintaining his characteristic calm. This hotel has always been more than bricks and mortar, he tells them firmly. It's a place where people come together, a symbol of trust and integrity. That trust was broken, but we're working hard to rebuild it. As the reporters scribble notes and snap photos, Emily watches from a distance, still adjusting to her newfound role as assistant manager. She wears a tailored blazer over her uniform, her name tag now reading Emily Carter, assistant manager. Her confidence grows with each passing day, bolstered by George's unwavering support. Later that afternoon, George calls Emily into his temporary office, a modest space filled with stacks of papers and blueprints for future projects. He gestures for her to sit, his expression thoughtful yet kind. Emily, he begins, leaning forward slightly, you've shown incredible strength and character during some very difficult times. I'd like to offer you an opportunity, one that could change your life. Emily tilts her head curiously. What kind of opportunity? George smiles faintly. I'm opening a new luxury hotel in Los Angeles, a project I've been planning for years. It'll be smaller than Rivermount, but just as prestigious. And I want you to lead it. Emily's eyes widen in disbelief. Lead it? Me? Yes, you, George replies with a nod. You've proven yourself capable of handling adversity with grace and determination. You have my full confidence. Tears well up in Emily's eyes as she processes his words. For so long, she had struggled simply to make ends meet, never imagining she'd be entrusted with such responsibility. I don't know what to say, she stammers, her voice thick with emotion. Say yes, George urges gently. Take this chance to build something extraordinary, not just for yourself, but for others. You deserve it. After a moment of reflection, Emily nods, her lips curving into a grateful smile. Thank you, Mr. Patterson. I won't let you down. Meanwhile, Alvin Richards receives his own promotion. In a brief ceremony held in the hotel's banquet hall, George gathers the staff to announce the decision. Alvin has been a steadfast ally throughout this ordeal, George says, addressing the assembled employees. His loyalty and ethics have set an example for all of us. Effective immediately, Alvin will serve as the general manager of Rivermount Hotel. The room erupts in applause as Alvin steps forward, visibly humbled by the recognition. "I'm honored," he says, his voice steady but emotional. "And I promise to uphold the values this hotel was founded on. Together, we'll create a workplace where everyone feels respected and valued." Emily beams at him from the crowd, proud of her friend and colleague. Over the next few weeks, the changes within the hotel become even more apparent. Employees are treated fairly, receiving raises and benefits that had long been denied under Brian's regime. Morale improves dramatically, with staff members collaborating openly and supporting one another. One evening, as Emily prepares to leave for the day, she notices George sitting alone in the lobby, gazing out at the city lights. She approaches him hesitantly, unsure if he wants company. "Mr. Patterson?" she asks softly. George turns and offers her a warm smile. "Emily. How's everything going?" "It's amazing," she admits, taking a seat beside him. "I never thought I'd see this place like this, so full of hope and positivity. Thank you for believing in me." George shakes his head slightly. "No, thank you, Emily. You reminded me why I started this hotel in the first place, to give people a place where they could thrive. Watching you rise above everything that happened, it's been truly inspiring." They sit in comfortable silence for a moment, reflecting on how far they've come. Finally, George rises to his feet, patting Emily lightly on the shoulder. "You'll do great things in Los Angeles," he assures her. "But remember, no matter where you go or what you achieve, stay true to yourself. That's the real key to success." Emily nods, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. As George walks away, his figure framed against the glittering skyline, she realizes that his legacy extends far beyond the hotel itself. Sometimes, the narrator muses, "A single act of courage can spark a chain reaction of change." At Rivermount Hotel, justice was served, not through vengeance, but through compassion, integrity, and the belief that even the darkest shadows can be overcome by light. The camera pans upward, showing the hotel bathed in golden light as the screen fades to black. Guests approach her to express their gratitude for her attentiveness, while staff members defer to her guidance with respect. It's clear that Emily has found her stride as the manager of this new establishment, a role she embraces with passion and dedication. One evening, after a long but fulfilling day, Emily sits at her desk in the corner office on the top floor. The room is adorned with personal touches, photos of her grandmother, motivational quotes pinned to the wall, and a small potted plant she nurtures daily. She picks up her phone and scrolls through recent messages, stopping when she sees one from George Patterson. "Hi, Emily," the text reads. "Just checking in. How's everything going?" A smile spreads across her face as she types back, "Everything's great, Mr. Patterson. Thanks for asking. I'd love to catch up soon." Moments later, her phone buzzes with his reply, "Call me George, please. And I'm glad to hear it. Let's set up a time to talk, I've got some insights about leadership you might find useful." Emily chuckles softly, shaking her head in admiration. Even though George no longer works directly with her, he remains an invaluable mentor, always ready to share wisdom and encouragement. Later that week, Emily and George meet virtually via video call. George sits in his cozy home office, surrounded by shelves lined with books and framed photographs. His expression is warm but focused as he greets her. "How's life treating you out there in LA?" he asks, leaning back in his chair. "It's incredible," Emily replies, her voice brimming with enthusiasm. "Every day feels like a new adventure. But honestly, I couldn't have done any of this without your support." George waves off her gratitude modestly. "You did the hard work, Emily. All I did was point you in the right direction." They spend the next hour discussing leadership strategies, team management, and ways to foster a positive work environment. George emphasizes the importance of empathy, reminding her that even the smallest gestures can make a big difference. "One thing I've learned over the years," he says thoughtfully, is that people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Never underestimate the power of kindness, it's what builds trust and loyalty. Emily nods, absorbing his words deeply. That's something I'll never forget. You taught me that firsthand. As their conversation winds down, Emily takes a moment to reflect aloud. You know, Mr. George, she begins, correcting herself with a grin, I often think about how differently things could have turned out if you hadn't shown up at Rivermount. If you hadn't believed in me when no one else did. That first cup of coffee you gave me, it wasn't just coffee. It was hope. A reminder that not everyone had written me off. George listens intently, his gaze steady. And you took that hope and ran with it, Emily. You faced challenges head-on, stood up for what was right, and proved yourself stronger than anyone expected. That's why you're where you are today, not because of me, but because of you. Tears well up in Emily's eyes, though she smiles warmly. Still, I owe you so much. Because of you, I realized that my struggles weren't just obstacles, they were opportunities to grow. To become someone who could make a difference. George leans forward slightly, his tone gentle but firm. Don't ever lose sight of that, Emily. Life will throw curveballs your way, but every challenge is a chance to learn, to adapt, and to inspire others. Remember, the world needs more people like you. After their call ends, Emily steps out onto the balcony overlooking the city. The lights of Los Angeles twinkle below, a sea of possibilities stretching endlessly before her. She thinks back to the days when she worked tirelessly as a housekeeper, struggling to provide for her grandmother and dreaming of a better future. Those dreams feel closer than ever now, not because they were handed to her, but because she fought for them. Sometimes, the narrator reflects, a single act of kindness can ripple outward, touching lives in ways we may never fully understand. For Emily Carter, that act became the foundation of a journey filled with resilience, growth, and triumph. As the camera pans upward to show the vast expanse of the city skyline, Emily gazes out at the horizon, her heart full of gratitude and determination. As Emily approaches her vehicle, she senses something unusual, a faint rustling sound coming from the shadows nearby. She pauses, glancing around cautiously, but sees nothing out of the ordinary. Shaking off the feeling, she unlocks her car door and begins to get inside. Suddenly, a shadowy figure lunges toward her, grabbing her arm with surprising strength. Startled, Emily tries to pull away, only to come face to face with Jess Harper. Surprised to see me? Jess sneers, her voice dripping with venom. You thought you could ruin my life and get away with it? Emily's heart races as she struggles to free herself. Jess, what are you doing? You're making a huge mistake. But Jess isn't listening. Her eyes burn with rage and desperation, fueled by bitterness over losing everything, her job, her reputation, and her freedom, after George exposed Brian's corruption. Though Jess had briefly escaped custody during a botched transfer months earlier, she'd been lying low ever since, plotting her revenge. You think you're so perfect now, don't you? Jess spits, tightening her grip on Emily's arm. Living your fancy new life while I'm stuck running scared. Well, guess what? That ends tonight. Before Jess can act further, Emily summons every ounce of courage and delivers a swift kick to her attacker's shin. Caught off guard, Jess stumbles backward, giving Emily enough time to scream for help. Moments later, security guards from the hotel rush outside, alerted by Emily's cries. They quickly assess the situation and restrain Jess, who thrashes wildly in their grasp. Let me go. Jess shrieks, her voice shrill with panic. She ruined everything. She deserves this. One of the guards radios for police backup while another checks on Emily, who stands trembling but unharmed. Are you okay, Miss Carter? The guard asks, his tone concerned. Emily nods shakily, clutching her arms around herself. I am fine. Thank you for getting here so quickly. Within minutes, police sirens wail in the distance, growing louder as patrol cars arrive on the scene. Officers step out and take control of the situation, handcuffing Jess and reading her rights. This isn't over. Jess shouts defiantly as she's led away, glaring daggers at Emily. You haven't seen the last of me. But Emily knows better. This time, there will be no escape for Jess, not with the full weight of the law bearing down on her. Later that evening, back inside the safety of her hotel office, Emily sits alone, trying to process what just happened. Her hand still trembles slightly as she pours herself a glass of water. Despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins, she feels an overwhelming sense of relief. Her phone buzzes on the desk, and she picks it up to see a text from George Patterson. Heard about the incident, the message reads. Are you alright? Emily exhales deeply before replying, I'm okay, thanks to security. It was Jess, but they caught her. George responds almost immediately, good. Let me know if you need anything. Justice has a way of finding those who refuse to learn. Emily smiles faintly, grateful for his unwavering support. Though the encounter with Jess was terrifying, it serves as a reminder of how far she's come, and how resilient she's become. The next morning, news outlets report Jess's arrest, detailing her failed attempt at revenge. The story sparks outrage among viewers, many of whom applaud Emily for standing strong in the face of danger. At the hotel, staff members express their concern and admiration for Emily, vowing to ensure her safety moving forward. Alvin even calls to check in, offering additional security measures if needed. You've got a whole team looking out for you, Emily, he reassures her over the phone. Don't hesitate to lean on us when you need to. Emily thanks him sincerely, touched by the outpouring of support. For the first time since the attack, she allows herself to relax, knowing she's surrounded by people who genuinely care about her well-being. That evening, Emily stands on the balcony of her office once more, gazing out at the glittering cityscape. Though the memory of Jess's ambush lingers, it doesn't overshadow her gratitude for the life she's built. Sometimes, the narrator reflects, the darkest moments remind us of our strength, and of the importance of community. Emily Carter faced her fears head-on, proving that resilience is forged not just through challenges, but through the bonds we share with others. As the camera pans upward to show the vast expanse of stars above, Emily takes a deep breath, ready to embrace whatever comes next. Her phone buzzes on the desk, a video call request from George Patterson. Smiling warmly, she accepts the call. George's familiar face appears on the screen, his expression kind but serious. Good morning, Emily, he greets her. How are you holding up? I'm doing okay, Emily replies, her voice steady but tinged with emotion. Better than I expected, honestly. I couldn't have gotten through all of this without you, and Alvin, too. George nods thoughtfully. You've shown incredible strength, Emily. But don't underestimate the power of gratitude, it's what keeps us grounded, even in the toughest times. Emily takes a deep breath, gathering her thoughts before speaking. I just wanted to say thank you, for everything. You believed in me when no one else did. You gave me a chance to prove myself, and because of that, I've been able to build something meaningful here. George smiles faintly, his gaze warm yet piercing. People reveal who they truly are when they think no one is watching. You proved yourself, Emily, not just through your hard work, but through your integrity and compassion. Never forget that. His words linger in the air, resonating deeply with Emily. She feels a lump rise in her throat, overwhelmed by the weight of his praise. I'll never forget it, she whispers, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. And I'll carry those lessons with me wherever I go. Later that day, a package arrives for Emily via courier. Curious, she carefully opens the box to find a small velvet pouch inside. Untying the ribbon, she reaches in and pulls out a golden key attached to a delicate chain. Engraved on the key are the words, doors yet unlocked. Emily holds the key in her palm, her heart swelling with gratitude. It's more than just a token, it's a reminder of the journey she's been on, and the limitless possibilities ahead. That evening, Emily calls Alvin Richards to express her thanks. They chat briefly about the recent events, and Alvin reassures her that she's earned every bit of success she's achieved. "You've come so far, Emily," he says warmly. "Rivermount Hotel wouldn't be where it is today without you, and neither would I. Don't ever doubt your worth." Emily smiles, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. "Thank you, Alvin. Your support means the world to me. I hope we can keep working together, even if it's just over long-distance calls." Alvin laughs lightly. "Absolutely. And hey, if you ever need advice or just want to vent, my door's always open." As night falls, Emily steps onto the balcony of her office once more. The city lights shimmer below, casting a golden glow across the horizon. She clasps the golden key around her neck, letting it rest against her chest as she gazes out at the sprawling skyline. In life, the narrator muses, gratitude often becomes the foundation upon which we build our future. For Emily Carter, each act of kindness she received became a stepping stone toward her dreams, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, there is always light to guide us forward. The camera pans upward, showing the vast expanse of stars above. Emily closes her eyes for a moment, breathing deeply. When she opens them again, her resolve is clear. Whatever challenges lie ahead, she knows she'll face them with courage, gratitude, and the unwavering belief that she's capable of unlocking any door. Emily stands just outside the doorway, adjusting her blazer and taking a calming breath before stepping inside. She looks every bit the confident leader she has become, her posture straight, her expression calm yet commanding. This is no longer the timid housekeeper who once scrubbed floors at Rivermount Hotel. This is a woman who has risen to greatness through sheer determination and integrity. Pushing open the door, Emily strides into the room, drawing the attention of everyone present. Conversations fade as heads turn toward her, their expressions respectful and admiring. Without hesitation, she takes her seat at the head of the table, her rightful place among leaders. "Good morning, everyone," she begins, her voice steady and authoritative. "Let's get started." As the meeting progresses, Emily leads the discussion with poise and clarity, addressing challenges and outlining strategies for the hotel's continued success. Her colleagues listen intently, nodding in agreement as she speaks. It's clear that she's earned not only their respect but also their trust. Throughout the meeting, Emily's thoughts drift briefly to her journey, the struggles, the setbacks, and the moments of triumph that brought her here. A soft voiceover begins, reflecting her inner musings. Her words echo as the camera transitions to flashbacks of key moments from her past, offering George a cup of coffee during his first day as a janitor, confronting Brian and Jess despite her fears, and standing tall when framed for theft. Each memory underscores the lessons she's learned and the person she's become. After the meeting concludes, Emily steps out onto the hotel's grand entrance plaza, where guests and staff bustle about under the warm California sun. As she pauses to take in the vibrant scene, her eyes land on a familiar sight, a new janitor pushing a cleaning cart across the marble floor. He's an older man with graying hair and a kind smile, his movements deliberate yet unhurried. For a moment, Emily feels a pang of nostalgia, remembering how her own journey began years ago, with humility, perseverance, and a willingness to help others. She approaches him warmly, extending her hand. "Hi there," she says with a friendly smile. "Welcome to the team. I'm Emily Carter, the hotel manager." The janitor looks up, surprised but pleased by her gesture. "Nice to meet you, Ms. Carter. I'm Harold. Just starting my first day." "Well, Harold," Emily replies, her tone encouraging, "if you ever need anything, or if anyone gives you trouble, you let me know, okay?" We're all part of the same team here. Harold nods gratefully, clearly touched by her kindness. Thank you, ma'am. I appreciate it. As Emily walks away, she glances back at Harold, her smile widening. The camera lingers on him for a moment before panning upward to capture the hotel's towering facade, gleaming proudly against the bright blue sky. What can we learn from Emily Carter's journey? That life is not just about the cards you're dealt, it's about how you play them. Her story reminds us that success isn't defined by titles, wealth, or recognition, it's built on values like integrity, resilience, and kindness. Emily didn't let fear stop her from standing up for what was right, even when the odds were stacked against her. And through small acts of courage and compassion, she transformed not only her own life but also the lives of those around her. This story challenges all of us to look beyond our circumstances and see opportunities for growth. It asks us to remember that no act of kindness is ever wasted, and that sometimes, the people who seem invisible hold the greatest wisdom. Emily's journey began with a simple cup of coffee shared with a stranger, yet it led her to places she never imagined possible. So, what will your first step be? If this story resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more inspiring tales that will leave you thinking long after the credits roll. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an update, and share this video with someone who needs a reminder that they, too, can overcome any obstacle. Because everyone deserves a chance to rewrite their story. Thank you for watching, and remember, every great journey starts with a single decision, to believe in yourself and take that first step forward. We'll see you in the next story.